and welcome from the First United Methodist Church in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. It is now officially Lent, and because of that, I am sitting here in my office ignoring the fact that there is an unopened package of Girl Scout cookies in the bottom left drawer of my desk. And that's why my hands are folded like this so that I can't reach down and open up the drawer. And back to our thinking here. Um, Fasting is often a part of Lent for many people. Uh, it's certainly something you don't hear a lot about, but it is in the Bible in many different places. Richard Foster, who wrote a book called Celebration of Discipline, that talks about fasting as one of many aids toward prayer, talks about how it can be a help or it can be a distraction. And he also warns that fasting isn't for everybody, that there are some people who physically can't fast, and there are some people who psychologically should not do that. I would add an amen to that because I knew somebody who actually had anorexia and used to use religious practice, like the religious practice of fasting, as what was really a cover for that anorexia. And it was very harmful to her in the long term. And so you have to be careful about that, as with anything. But under the proper circumstances, it might be not such a bad thing. Jesus himself fasted and he taught his disciples about fasting. And we have the witness of the Gospels that he began his public ministry only after a prolonged time of prayer and fasting, during which he was confronted by the temptations of the evil one. We'll come back to that in just a little bit. But first, let me quote from Richard Foster in his book. He says, "More than any other single discipline, fasting reveals the things that control us. We cover up what's inside of us with food and other good things, but in fasting, those things that control us, surface. How easily we begin to let non essentials take precedence in our lives. How quickly we crave things we do not need until we are enslaved by them. Our human cravings and desires are like a river that tends to overflow its banks. Fasting helps keep them in their proper channel." I would add to what he said that fasting, generally, though it refers to abstaining from food, not from water, but from food, for usually about a day, um, is not the only thing that people can and sometimes should fast from. People may also fast from things like screen time. After you watch this, people may fast from speech. Be quiet for a day or so and listen instead. People fast from alcohol or caffeine or any of the things that can have a physical grip on them. Those are tricky things to do, but people do. And this is different, mind you, from dieting because it means focusing on God during that time, not on your own physical appearance. Matthew 4 says this: Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. He fasted 40 days and 40 nights, and afterwards he was famished. The tempter came and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread." But he answered, "It is written, one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." Then the devil took him to the holy city and placed him on the pinnacle of the temple, saying to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down. For it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and on their hands they'll bear you up, so that you will not dash your foot against a stone." Jesus said to him, "Again, it is written, do not put the Lord your God to the test." Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the earth and their splendor. And he said to him, "All these I will give to you if you will fall down and worship me." Jesus said to him, "Away with you, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve only him." Then the devil left him, and suddenly angels came and waited on him. Now, Jesus' time in the desert was a time when he was facing down and overcame temptation. And it was done in preparation for his longer active ministry. What he did was to keep his focus on God in the face of all the other things, in the face of his personal desires and his personal needs and wants, and pay attention instead to God. And that enabled him, when the time came, to draw upon that awareness, not just to say yes to God, but to say no to evil. The first temptation that we hear about was when he was invited to turn stones into bread to eat. Something pretty basic, something that you would not normally put somebody down for or fault them for in any way, especially after 40 days and 40 nights without. I mean, that whole little line in there, afterwards he was famished. No kidding. Who wouldn't be? But the whole point of what he was doing was not to eat. In fact, it wasn't simply that he had left the settled areas for the desert, but that he had gone even farther than that and was doing without for a very clear and a very key purpose. Jesus had started his fast, if you want to look at it in that way, when he left heaven itself to come to earth for the sake of humanity. He was used to giving up. He had given up far more than his food. Paul would later say, though he was in the form of God, he did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped or something to be exploited. You can translate it either way. But emptied himself. Jesus' whole ministry was a ministry of emptying, not of, emptying himself, that others could be full. And his time of fasting in the desert expresses it in a concrete way. But it also was a time of preparation for enduring the cross, which was key in that giving up of God's glory that he had every right to claim, to be part of, and coming and living under conditions that we do. And so the temptation to use his power to spare himself from hunger was the same temptation to spare himself from suffering that would be placed before him over and over again right up to the end. And throughout his time, Jesus must have prayed as he did in Gethsemane the night before the crucifixion. My Father, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not what I want, but what you want. Right up to the very moment when he was actively dying on the cross. The voice of the tempter echoed in the people who were mocking him from the ground around the cross. If you are the Son of God, there's that same language, the same wording that the devil had used in the beginning of all of this. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross. And he saved others. He cannot save himself. He's the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross now, and we'll believe in him. See the temptation there. Katsintzakis, who wrote The Last Temptation of Christ, I think he got it right in recognizing that one of the great temptations that Jesus would face was simply to lead the kind of life exactly that we do, which involves not doing the things that God asks of us, not taking on the suffering, not looking at others instead of ourselves, not saying, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. Jesus did those things. And the temptation to turn back on God's will, to save himself instead of others, would not just go away, but it was a part of his life. And it was a temptation to which he never gave in. Now, we are unlike him in that we do give in, but not always, and not inevitably. One thing that Jesus' temptation teaches us is that the voice of the tempter is subtle. And if that voice came to Jesus, surely it will come to us as well. And it'll be subtle then. So don't take it at face value, because he didn't. Treat it like you might say an online ad, which, if you think about it, really is something that's out there to tempt people to do something, to buy something, to believe something, and generally is quite empty. If an offer sounds too good to be true, they say, it probably is. Temptation. Use your common sense. Look at things before you jump. And trust what God may be saying to you quietly, while other voices are saying something else to you far more loudly. And whenever, as sometimes does happen, temptation announces itself without that subtlety, but doesn't have a very good disguise, don't be afraid to answer it as bluntly as it's presented to you. If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down from the pinnacle of the temple. For it's written, he will give his angels charge over you, and on their hands they'll bear you up, so that you will not dash your foot against a stone. Jesus' answer, again, it's written, do not put the Lord your God to the test, might as well have been, why exactly would I throw myself off the top of a tall building? Why would I want to do that? Or even, do you really think I'm that stupid? It was something obvious. And the other temptation, bowing down to the devil in return for the world, there's a whole sermon series in that discussion. Why would he, when he had given up all of heaven to be among us, would he give up his place in God's eyes for the earth, or for some small part of it, even? In whatever way we do come to understand ourselves better, to learn about ourselves, whether it's through temptation, through prayer, hopefully we go with the prayer and not the temptation, but we learn from our mistakes too. That itself is God's grace working with us. But however it is, we come to learn to put ourselves second or third. First after God's will, second after others, and then where we are. But not denying ourselves. Well, yes, denying ourselves, but putting ourselves in the right place. When we learn perspective and where we really are in comparison to others, then we take ourselves less seriously sometimes. That can also be a good thing. And we gain a greater sense that there is something going on that God has in mind that is beyond just our own desires. It's like the end of Casablanca, where Humphrey Bogart turns to Ingrid Bergman and says, the problems of a couple like us don't amount to a hill of beans in a world like this. I know I got the line wrong. Sorry, but you know what I'm saying. Peter Morty recently wrote a column where he says this: to be spiritually alive involves placing our dependence on God, not just rolling in the ocean of the self. It's exalting others, not celebrating personal grandeur. It's enjoying a life that pulsates with the whole human family, breathing, breathing through us in all kinds of ways. Or, as Jesus put it, those who want to save their lives lose them. And those who lose their life for my sake will find it. Happy Lent, everybody.